So I hope I've given you some ideas. You might want to unmute your microphones now if you want to join in with a bit of conversation. I just wanted to summarise with you what we've just been talking about. We've just been talking about how you can use IP for your probation period, how it can help with observation and monitoring, how it can help with check-ins and period check-ins, how it can monitor and analyse and record competencies and standards throughout the probation period, how you can add probation collaborators, gain 360 feedback, and how you can tie it all together right at the very end by pulling off, and throughout the period, reporting and analysing all of that probation data. So when you do come to your end review of the probation period, you've got a really, really clear overview of how this person is performing. So are there any questions or anything needed for clarification on any of these areas at all? Or if you want to share any of your thoughts on any of those areas, if that's something that you've been thinking about for some time, and you now think that this is suitable for you and your organisation. Angela, you've got your hand up. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just, we actually do run our probations on College IP, but we've taken a slightly different approach. So I just wanted to throw that into the mix.
Okay.
I can see pros and cons with either, but we haven't created a separate group for staff on probation.
Okay.
Because we obviously have a wide range of staff. Don't just have teaching staff, we have a large number of very different types of support staff. So there would be quite a mishmash of people if they were all in one group together, and you couldn't identify standards that would work for everybody.
Yeah.
So our approach would be more to get them straight into the group that they are a part of naturally and need to aspire to fully engage with. So so they just go into their regular groups. And in terms of the probation, we've given guidance to our managers around following what you're suggesting, really. So the interim review process we find is really, really useful for those probation meetings.
Yeah, that's good.
So what we do is in that first week, we introduce the manager introduces them to College IP and opens the review like you would with any member of staff and sets the targets for their probation period. So we encourage managers to think around what targets, where do you expect or want this member of staff to be by the end of their probation period, and set targets accordingly. I think the other thing that you haven't perhaps touched on, but which we find really useful, is in the targets themselves. There's that tab where you can set specific actions under each target.
Yeah.
So we use that as creating those very practical small stepping stones towards the main target, so that in the interim reviews, you can demonstrate progress towards that overall target by looking at how they've got on with the actions.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That is a really useful tool.
It is a very useful thing. The only thing I would say is the one thing that is I don't know if this is something that is worth looking at in College IP for development, but at the moment, when you're in an interim review, you can't actually access the actions. You have to come out of the interim review and access the actions via the target.
Right, so to be able to review those.
To review them, so you almost have to review all your actions and your targets and then go into the interim review. So it might be quite useful to be able to access those actions when you're in the interim review, I would feel, because we do lay quite a lot of store by those actions.
Right. I've certainly take that forward. Thank you for that. Thanks for that feedback.
And then the only other thing to say is that I've also, just for this lockdown period, removed the requirement in interim review mode to do passwords. So because there's a lot of remote meetings going on, and obviously you wouldn't want two people at the same PC tapping on the same keyboard. So I've removed that password requirement, and often they're doing it over Teams, and they can share screens, talk about it. The manager can update whilst they're talking. But there isn't, and then they agree it verbally, but there isn't the password on it at the moment.
Oh, yes, yes.
Sorry, just to help you out with that, Angela, from a HR perspective, what some customers are doing, if you go into the activity bit, you can, I think it says add a blog. And what they've done is they've just got the member of staff to just go in there and write a note just to say they've given approval for the interim review, just to cover yourself from a HR perspective.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we would do that. We would do that if we got to a formal point where we'd got capability issues, or we were moving into a formal process. But I think in that regular interaction and meetings, I'm comfortable with how we're doing it. The only thing I did notice is we don't have across the tabs there. You've got that reviewee comment as well as the reviewer comment.
Yes.
That would be a good thing to be able to use for exactly that, but we don't have that in ours. Is that something you add to yourself or customize in some way?
It's in settings, so we can
in the
talk
settings, is it? Yeah,
yes,
that'd be great. That would be great, because then we've got that opportunity for that two-way conversation to be recorded.
Yeah, and that's particularly useful as well, obviously, when you're reviewing the spider diagram.
Yeah.
And you're discussing any discrepancy.
Yeah.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you for that. So, Michael, can I just ask you a quick question? How are you planning on implementing?
It was we saw it advertised in the latest release, and one of our big things is that we have a number of NQTs each year, so it was just a way of perhaps looking at it to see whether we could put our NQT process on school IP, so it's just then a natural flow through the years as we go through. So what you showed us today is a great help. So we'll sort of sit down with the people that are involved and see if we can get it on, what forms and what areas and things that we can perhaps do moving forwards next academic year.
Yeah, we have a lot of schools using it for their NQTs, and we've also got several school-centred ITT centres using it as well. So when teachers are during their training, so they're all pretty sort of similar areas: probation, NQT, and initial teacher training, and it's all used in a similar sort of way. So yeah, I mean, if you want any support with any of that, Michael, then obviously just get in touch with us.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll see how we get on first.
Yeah, sure, that's absolutely no problem. And how about you, Holly?
I think, yeah, it all looks really good. I think where we fail sometimes is these interim review meetings get missed by the line managers, and then I end up chasing them, but the time's slipping by, and then we miss the deadlines.
Right.
So something like this would be really useful.
Yeah.
So it's just even more clear, and the documentation is really clear as well, because what we find is, sometimes what happens is you get a member of staff who, if the communication's not been great or that interim review meeting has been missed, they're unaware that there's an issue.
Yes,
or that management feel there's an issue, and it's comes sometimes as a surprise to the member of staff because the communication's not been there, it's not been quite transparent. So I can see where this would really, really help in those situations.
Yeah.
As well as just keeping us a bit more on the ball with it all.
So a way that the SLT can review whether interims have taken place or not. Are you aware that if you go to home, if you're logged in as an administrator, for example, and then you would go to the My Staff, you can see all staff.
Yes.
And then one of the columns in that chart tells you how many interim reviews have taken place and the last date. So that's pretty useful. That's
really useful. Yeah, really useful.
Yeah. So that's sort of how you would find that. And going back to what Angela was saying as well, obviously it's most likely that interim reviews should have taken place during these lockdowns. Good piece of advice from Angela would be to turn off that password acceptance, and or train your staff in passing the presentation tool on Teams or Zoom, so they can put their password in. So there were 2 ways around it.
Yeah, Holly, if you are stuck, I think you're my customer anyway. So if you want to arrange a session, we can do that, sort it all out for you.
Thanks, Andy.
Angela, did you have your hands up again?
Well, I'm just trying to think what I was going to say now about, yes, I think what I was going to say was we have the same thing where we've got managers who are absolutely on it with the probations, and then others who miss reviews, and sometimes college IP doesn't necessarily help get them better at that, but it does flag it perhaps to you as the administrator more readily. But one of the best practice, the managers who are really good at this, I find, and who've really sort of taken college IP on board, they actually, when they've got a new member of staff starting, they actually book in those interim reviews ahead of time. So they're actually in college IP in advance. So the dates are all set and ready, and both parties know they're in the diary, but they're also set up as blank interim reviews ready. So when the time comes, they just go in and do it, and they know that if they can't make that date, they've got to just change the date.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. And that will then flag up to each member of staff that is something that needs to be completed.
Exactly. I've just been telling all of our management group that that's the best practice, but they're not all doing it yet, but one or two are.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So has anybody else got any questions? Can we help anybody perhaps review their processes or embed any probation period processes or anything else, really, anything to do with IP?
I mean, from my point of view, we're sort of all right, because our biggest problem is because everyone is sort of so remote. Our sort of review process is all a little bit over the top. We're trying to sort of keep it as formal as possible, but it's just we're sort of going with the flow a bit more. So I think we're probably all right from that point of view.
Yeah.
I think definitely I'm going to be feeding back to my colleagues at work that I would like to see if we can send you our current probation form and see how that would look on here.
Sure, that would be perfect. Yeah.
So I'll be annoying Andy probably with that.